It's that time of the week for the Cubs Weekly Podcast presented by Wintrust, proud legacy partner of the Chicago Cubs, an exclusive home of Cubs checking. Open online today at wintrust.com/Cubs Weekly. We're back with you, Elise Menaker, Andy Martinez, Tony Andracki. Guys, good to see you. Is what to be. We expect a very eventful week. And on that note, we actually have a very eventful podcast because coming up, you're going to hear Cole Wright got the chance to talk to GM Carter Hawkins, an extensive interview for you. So everything you want to know there coming up. But first, as always, we're starting with the trivia question. Okay, when I ask it, because we don't want this to take all day. All right, since 2010, how many Cubs players have hit a home run as their first career hit?
Oh,
and if
man.
you name them, extra bonus points, I guess. But we can just go for
Christopher Morel.
Yeah, Morel and Willson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one, you know it. Morel.
We know it.
Contreras. You know them. You're just not thinking of it right now.
You're saying first career, right? Like not just first Cubs hit?
Yeah, first career hit.
First career hit.
Starlin Castro. Is that a homer?
Yeah.
Nice.
That's the first one, 2010. His first career at bat.
Didn't Javi do it?
Yeah.
All right. There we go.
Colorado.
Two
The
more.
extras.
Two more. Okay.
One of them is so odd, like you just are forgetting it. I don't want to give it away because anything I say will I guess I'll just say
no, we'll get it. We'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to think.
I don't think Chris Bryant did it, did he?
Nope.
Okay.
Ian
Jorge Soler.
No.
Yeah.
Happ.
Yeah. Wait, you guys you just got it.
Oh, we got
Happ
both.
and Soler.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there we go.
So there's 6 of them. Castro in 2010, Baez in 14, Soler in 14, Contreras in 2016, Happ in 2017, and Morel, of course, we had this year. So all of these were in the players' big leagues debut. Besides Contreras, he came in to catch in the 9th 2 days prior. So it wasn't necessarily his debut. And here's a fun fact. Ian Happ hit on Wilson's birthday. So
nice.
Because I'm sure on this podcast, their names will come up a lot. On that note, it was
spoiler alert.
Yeah, perfect segue. Really, it was an emotional week. Even just a couple of days at Wrigley Field in a short mini series with the Pirates. So that's where we're going to start, and it involved the two guys we just mentioned, Happ and Contreras. Most notably, Contreras, very emotional before, after, the night before the game, all of it. So, Tony, I'll just start with you. I know that really both of you guys have been at the games, but Tony, I'll just start with you and kind of your impressions of what we just saw.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool moment. It felt a little different, obviously, than last year when it was KB and Rizzo's last game at Wrigley, and they were sitting on the top step of the dugout, in the dugout there. They were sitting on that bench, and they didn't get into the game, and it was obviously just very different. And Willson gets this amazing emotional reaction from the crowd, steps in, first pitch single, leads to a 3-run rally, Cubs win, and it was cool. And I thought there were so many different aspects of it that were very cool and emotional, and for him to get an even louder ovation, I thought, in the 7th inning for his final at bat. And then after the win, where the whole team normally comes through and the guys on the bench meet the guys in the field for the line, Jason Hayward held everybody back from the bench, let Willson go in front of him. And then those guys didn't even cross the third baseline. So Willson went out, hugged each guy in the field individually, then came back, gave Hayward a big hug. David Ross picked him up. It was just pretty cool overall. And then, he shared a really cool moment with Ian Happ in the dugout. And I know Taylor tweeted it out, and then Scotty C, you could see getting in there for the photo right before in the middle of it. But no, just so many cool aspects, I think, all around, particularly with Willson on Tuesday.
Yeah, it was a really special 2 days. It really started that first day of the series, after the game where Wilson's talking about, just how special it was, and, him realizing, and he said, he knew eventually it would get to him, and this was the series where it got to him, right? It's been so impressive watching him, put away all that outside noise, become an all-star starter for the 3rd time, put together one of his best career seasons. You know, with everything that's going on, it's pretty remarkable for him to have put together the season that he's put together, just given, you know, it would have been so easy to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get traded. Like, you know, I'm not going to like put a full effort because I know I'm not going to be playing. I could be not playing with the team in a couple months. You know, it's just been impressive to see what he's done and put it all together this season. There were cool moments too for Ian Happ, you know, where he got a ball signed by the fans in the bleachers. You know, it was just a really emotional week for those two guys. You know, that came up through the system, and really, really cool to see just how Cubs fans embraced them because, yeah, you know, you mentioned it last year, Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo. I believe Rizzo was on deck for the final out in his last game at Wrigley Field, or maybe it was KB, one of them. And you just like, it was like, you would have loved to have seen it if it was possible to get a, you know, final sign off. And if this is the end for Willson Contreras and Ian Happ, it was nice to see that they got the send off that they very much deserved.
Yeah, I think that everything you guys have said, I've said it before, but I'll say it again because I really appreciate the emotion that Contreras has shown and has always shown as a player, but especially in these human moments, because we know that's where the emotion is coming from. That yes, as the baseball player, there's the potential that, you know, his time as a Cub is coming to an end and he's showing that. And then there's also, that's the human element too, right? That he's loved playing in Chicago. He's loved being a Cub, and just kind of the reality of everything you've known to this point since coming to the United States could change. So, and Hap's been the same way, actually. I mean, this is a guy who's really honest and open about how he feels about things, everything from the All-Star game, and that was important to him and wanting to go there. And, you know, how much he loves the Cubs fans, the Cubs as an organization, same thing, like the only team that he knows. And so I think it was really, you know, like you said, Tony, like cool, honestly, to see them embrace there in the dugout at the end. I love seeing those moments because that's kind of where the ball player goes to the side. And that's just when they're two, you know, friends, two teammates, bonding over what could be a similar situation. So, yeah, I think, it was cool to see it happen at Wrigley, like get a chance like that. Like you said, the standing ovation. And now we'll really just see what happens, because that's the whole thing, the unknown. And so kind of just waiting, and that's where we're at now. So when we're recording this podcast, still, you know, waiting to see what happens to guys like a Willson Contreras and Ian Happ, a David Robertson. You could even throw Michael Givens in there, Chris Martin. I think even Patrick Wisdom's name has been thrown out there for some possibilities of team needing a hitter and some good defense. So just kind of, Andy, I'll start with you. And when I mentioned all of that, just as you look ahead to the deadline, really in a few days, what almost like you're feeling or anticipating?
Yeah, you know, it's just, I just remember last year where, you know, everything kind of, you know, you knew it was coming and then it kind of all happened at once. And just, you know, kind of the aftermath of that. That's kind of the feeling that we're in right now. It's just waiting for that, you know, for, you know, not trying to be like super like corny or anything, but like, you know, waiting for that first domino to fall, right? Where it's like, all right, well, you know, when does it start? And maybe we saw it, you know, Wednesday night with the Yankees acquiring Andrew Benintendi, you know, one outfielder, you know, coming off the market. Does that, you know, if Ian Happ is really as sought after as we've seen in reports, you know, does this Andrew Benintendi move maybe accelerate things a little bit? For me, it's just, you know, waiting for it to happen. You know, it's like the calm before the storm. It's whatever cliche you want to use. That's kind of what it is. You're just waiting for it to happen. And, you know, the series in San Francisco is going to be big for so many reasons. You know, obviously we're talking about the great things, or the great things that Ian Happ and Willson Contreras have done, and the great moments they've had. They're also on a 6-game winning streak. You know, there's a lot going on with the team. And there's also this, you know, what's going to happen here in a couple of days, because in a week from now, the Cubs might look a little bit different than the team we saw take the field at Wrigley Field against the Pirates.
Yeah, and, you know, on top of all the names you just mentioned, Elise, I mean, Drew Smyly and Wade Miley too.
Sure.
I think you know, it would make a ton of sense for Smyly to go if Wade Miley shows well in his rehab start in a couple of days here. Then maybe a team would be willing to give up a prospect for him. If not, obviously he could slide into Smyly's spot in the rotation for the Cubs down the line and give them meaningful innings. But yeah, you know, I mean, there are so many possible names that could be out there, but my gut says they're not going to trade 8 guys in the days leading up to the deadline like they did last year, 9 total, including, Jock Peterson during the All-Star break. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Obviously, we know it's not that big of a deal with these franchise cornerstones. You're really looking at like Willson and Happ from that regard. But also I think the bullpen's really interesting because you mentioned the 3 guys, Chris Martin, Michael Givens, and David Robertson. I mean, Robertson, of course, makes a ton of sense. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest. But, for Givens, he does have an option for next year as well. And I'm curious if the Cubs would want to get rid of all 3 of those guys and really kind of devastate the back end of the bullpen when they are still learning how to win. And that's a popular topic around the clubhouse and around David Ross is these young guys learning how to win on a regular basis, getting some feel-good vibes going into the offseason. That's tough to do if the bullpen is blowing leads or if you have 6 rookies down there or something like that. So, Scott Effross, Rowan Wick have really come into their own, Brandon Hughes. But I'm just kind of curious to see if all 3 of those veteran relievers will go or not. Or I imagine David Ross definitely wants one of those guys for sure to stick around and help for the 8th or 9th. But I think that's kind of what I'm paying attention to.
I was going to say really quickly answer that point, Tony, Michael Givens, the veteran leadership. I remember there's a moment, Ethan Roberts at the beginning of the season, he makes his debut. He comes in the clubhouse and Michael Givens comes up to him, hugs him. And I asked Ethan, like, what was that moment? And he said, welcome to the big leagues. You're a big leaguer now. No one can take that away from you. And that's just like a special moment that Michael Givens shared with Ethan Roberts on his big league debut. That veteran leadership is kind of huge. We saw it last year, in the second half of the season with guys like Rex Brothers and Adam Morgan for some of the young guys that were with the Cubs in the second half in the bullpen. That's to your point, Tony. There's a ton of value in that too.
Yeah, and I think the final aspect would be whatever moves are made, what the Cubs get in return. Yeah. Looking at probably building up a pretty strong farm system already, and or what, if any big league players ready right now you get back. So I think it's just more so about of the names being tossed out there, who actually, is the name that we hear, maybe multiple, and then what comes back, and then what the team and the prospects look like. So one of the masterminds behind everything we're talking about, he's not going to tell us what we're chatting about, but he did tell Cole Wright a lot in his interview. So coming up after the break, you have Cole Wright sitting down with GM Carter Hawkins. They're going to talk about Willson's future, Nico's emergence this season, and his first draft as GM. So stick around because we have that coming up.
We know you love Chicago. You devour the pizza, admire Chicago's skyline, and cheer on Chicago sports teams, especially the Cubs. If you wanted to live in a more boring place, you'd live in St. Louis. Why not bank with Chicago's bank too? Upgrade your wallet with an exclusive Wintrust Cubs debit card, which you can get when you open a Wintrust Cubs checking account. Show your Cubs pride and open an account at wintrust.com/Cubs. Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
You talked about it, the trade deadline, it's right around the corner, so let's not beat around the bush. Obviously, August 2nd, and one of the big centerpieces when it comes to some of those moves that could potentially be made, obviously Willson Contreras. He avoided arbitration, came to terms on a deal north of $9 million, but on August 3rd, I think all the Cubs fans out there want to know, will he be a Chicago Cub?
Yeah, we couldn't say one way or the other, obviously, more from a specific standpoint, but obviously that's a decision that we're going to be making over the course of the next few days and weeks. Obviously it's one that's been a conversation over the course of the entire year. We love Willson. Sure. Willson loves us. He wants to be here for a long time. We'd love to have him here for a long time. We got to figure out what's best for the Cubs in the short term and in the long term, and make that decision. It might be a hard decision. It might not be. But it's something that we're digging into every single day. Yeah,
he said that being a Chicago Cub is his top priority. And, of course, trying to make him a Chicago Cub for the foreseeable future, that's a top priority of the front office. But if he does have to go elsewhere, is there a potential that he could be re-signed once again? Because we know that his heart is here in the Windy City.
Yeah, I think we would never rule out any player, especially a player that's as important to this franchise and to the Cubs as Willson has been. So, yeah, I mean, obviously nothing's set in stone on the next week or this offseason, but, I think it's very safe to say we like Willson in a Cubs uniform and would love to figure out ways to make that happen short and long term.
Okay, no, Willson Contreras not the only person that a lot of people like seeing in a Cubs uniform. There's also some centerpieces from that 2016 World Series championship. Of course, Kyle Hendricks, Jason Hayward, and then when it comes to productive players, you also want to throw Ian Happ in that mix. Clearly not a member of that World Series team, but either way, certainly a big part when it comes to August 2nd and that trade deadline. Are we going to see any movement with any of those guys? I know that's a subject that you want to keep close to the vest, but Cubs fans fans, they want to know, Carter?
I think we're in a position right now where we can't eliminate any possibility.
Okay.
You know, we, again, talked about making hard decisions. Jed obviously made some really difficult decisions last year, you know, at the trade deadline, and, you know, certainly are excited about the players that we brought into the organization as a result of that, and we have to weigh, is that something that we want to do again here at this position? Obviously, some of these guys have more control than others. That changes the equation a little bit there, but, you know, right now we're really excited about the young players we have in our system. The opportunity to add to that is obviously something that's very interesting for us. You know, we're looking at the Cubs teams of the future and the Cubs teams of the present at the same time and trying to balance how to be most competitive long-term and short-term. And it makes for some really difficult calls, but ones that we're going to have to make here in the next week.
Okay, well, remaining flexible, that's something that you always want to keep on the front burner. And when flexibility comes into the discussion, you take a look at Nico Hoerner and some of the needs with this team moving forward. I think he's kind of closed that window, maybe just a little bit, if I'm correct in that assumption, that when it comes to needing that big-time shortstop, Nico Hoerner, he could be maturing and evolving into that guy.
Yeah, I mean, taking aside all the other players in the league, just looking at Nico and saying, hey, has this guy established himself as an everyday shortstop in the major leagues? I think he certainly has.
Yeah.
You know, from a defensive standpoint, he's been outstanding. Offensively, he's been great. You know, he's a bat that high contact, but he's also hit for some power and had a little bit more damage this year. So we could not be more encouraged on the field and then off the field.
Yeah.
And I think he really embodies everything that we're looking for, you know, in that clubhouse in terms of a guy that comes every single day, plays his tails off, works his tail off. You know, he's a great example for all those guys and a great leader in that clubhouse.
Another guy who's proved his weight on this team so far this year, it's the first-time All-Star, of course, Ian Happ. And when it comes to his potential and what he brings to the table with this team, his leadership role, I mean, it's been next level, Carter.
Yeah, I mean, to see him with the first All-Star selection, you know, to see him walking the red carpet, you know, down in L.A., I mean, I think, you know, one thing that I haven't been able to experience with him, but the guys in the organization have been here longer, is just, you know, some of the ups and downs of his career, and to see that just determination and that grit to get to where he is right now, and just seeing those consistent at-bats from the right side and the left side, and the play in left field. I mean, it's been really fun for us to watch. So really excited about that with Ian and could not be happier for him.
Yeah. How is the consistency of him being in left field every single day, knowing that when he comes to the ballpark, he has that peace of mind, okay, I'm not going to be here, I'm not going to be there, I'm going to be in left field. How much has that contributed to his success in the batter's box?
I think it helps. I mean, I think on one end, obviously guys love being able to come in and say, I want to be in the same place every day, and that comfort, that routine. We all feel that in our normal lives. I think at the same time, you look at a lot of teams that have had a lot of success in moving different players around different positions, creating flexibility at their lineups, giving them a little bit more advantage in platoon areas. Obviously, with Ian being a switch hitter, he's able to get in every day and play that well every day. So I think those are things that we're always factoring in, is, you know, that comfort versus that flexibility with our lineups, but it's been easy with Ian. He's been the best shot for us in left field every day.
Absolutely. Now, you just said you had your hands full, of course, with your first draft as a general manager. And the draft, as we know, it came and went, and you guys had the 7th selection overall, and you went with Cade Horton out of OU. That's Oklahoma University. Jim Callis of MLB Pipeline, senior writer, said that he was the best pitcher available in the draft at that point. Why did he turn your head?
Yeah, he's a really interesting case. You know, so he's 20 years old, was a quarterback in college, so, you know, has that athleticism already. Had Tommy John surgery last year, only had 55-ish innings this year. Wasn't a guy that was necessarily performing extremely well early in the season. As he got later into the season, a little bit further away from his Tommy John, velocity started creeping up. He added a slider that turned into a wipeout pitch. By the end of the year in the College World Series, he was dominating teams, just dominating. You know, had an unbelievable outing against Ole Miss in the College World Series. And you can see with this guy, hey, like, this guy has the potential to be a starting pitcher for a long time in the major leagues. Now, not as much track record as some other guys, so it's a little bit more of a variance in outcomes, but knowing the type of person he is, the type of athlete he is, and then what he's able to do on a high stage, it was a pretty encouraging pick for us, and we're glad to have him in our system.
Yeah, you have to be elated because 8 of the top 10 draft picks have been signed today. Jackson Ferris, the number 2 selection by you guys, 47th overall. He's not one of them. A left-handed pitcher out of IMG Academy, has a lot of pop on that fastball. So what was it about you that intrigued you about him?
Yeah, so a left-handed high school pitcher. He's from Mount Airy, North Carolina, which I believe is actually what they based Mayberry, North Carolina, off of in the Andy Griffith show.
So
he is not from a large town. Chicago will probably be the biggest city that he'll ever be in. But he went down to IMG Academy in Florida to play, to have a little bit better competition in high school, which meant that he pitched against a lot of great bats and just showed his ability to compete at that level, showed some just grit and tenacity and how he goes about things every day, but also has 4 major league quality pitches. there's some things we're going to need to do with his delivery, with his body that you'd have to do with any 18-year-old. But he's a guy that's been high on draft boards for a long time, and we're really excited to have him in our system as well.
Okay, something tells me you're also really excited about the future when it comes to pitching, because 16 of the 20 picks you invested in arms. Is that something that you're really locked down on, making sure that the rotation, the bullpen, everything is shored up?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you think about the state of the game right now, there's a premium on pitching. There's a premium on pitching. You see it in free agency. There's a premium on pitching. You see it in players that are available in trades. And so from our standpoint, it's thinking about, okay, how can we, if there's premiums in all these other areas, where else can we acquire it to continue to just build our stable up? And the draft is a great place to do that. And so that premium was reflected in the way that we valued our players going into the draft. It didn't have a specific plan to say, hey, we're going to pick 16 pitchers in these 20 picks, but the way our board fell out, it put us in a place to get a lot of arms.
Okay.
Feel really good about the infrastructure that we have. You're seeing, guys like Willson last night, guys like Hughes, guys coming up that have started coming through that infrastructure that really started to be put in place a couple of years ago. And we're excited to put more guys into that pipeline and have more guys debut up here.
Okay, when it comes to seeing and knowing quality pitchers, as a former Vanderbilt University Commodore, you know what it's like to be back there behind the dish. Do you feel that gives you a more keen of an eye when it comes to scouting some of those arms?
I'd love to say it. I think if you look at my stats,
yes, come on.
If you look at my stats, I wasn't playing in actual games that often. I caught a ton of bullpens from a lot of first rounders
when they were getting their work in.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
which you could say is the most important time, right,
right.
Cole? But no, I mean, I think the fact that I got to watch a ton of baseball, both at Vandy those 4 years and then in Cleveland and for 14 years, and talk to a lot of great baseball people, that's really helped me in just my understanding of what it takes to be a great major leaguer. I'm still nowhere near where I need to be. But feel like we can get better every day and help these pitchers and these position players get better every day as well.
Absolutely. Like we said, 16 of the 20 selections, they were pitchers. And when it comes to young pitching, we've seen Keegan Thompson and Justin Steele, their emergence in 2022. These guys have really shouldered a whole bunch of the load. How big have they been for David Ross and the Cubs front office this season?
Yeah, that's been great. I mean, Keegan's been our stopper in some ways, and just in terms of getting us out of some of these losing streaks that we've had. And then Justin has continued to battle and put out great outings, and miss a whole lot of bats from the left side.
Sure.
So really encouraging to have two young starting pitchers and be able to carry that workload. You look back to where Keegan was last year and juxtapose that to where he is this year. He's holding his stuff better, he's commanding his stuff better, and his stuff has ticked up. Kind of same thing with Justin. So, really encouraging. We just need to continue to develop more guys like that, because you can see the impact that has on the team, both from allowing your offense to perform a little bit more easily and then also allowing you to leverage your relievers in a great place. So I'm excited about those guys and continue to get more up here, I hope.
Yeah, it's all about the guys developing currently in the system, as well as the addition of potential other players. And we know that Jed, the president of baseball operations, said that I know the money will be there at the right time. So plain and simple, Carter, when will be the right time for this Cubs franchise to go out there and spend to build that next great Cubs team? I
think it's getting closer and closer every year.
Yeah.
I mean, this offseason, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 teams that spent more on their 2022 payroll than us. But we were up there in terms of just adding to our 2022 team. That said, right, we started from a little bit of a lower base. I think we're continuing to build that base up. We'll continue to add to that payroll and hopefully put us in a place to be more competitive this year. We had that hope going into this year. Felt like we were a team that if we'd been able to stay healthy, that we had overperformed a little bit, that we'd be in a place to be adding at the trade deadline right now. Candidly, obviously, that has not happened, right? We haven't stayed healthy. We haven't overperformed. We're working every single day to figure out how we can stay healthy, how we can get our guys to do the things that we know that they can do and they know that they can do. And hopefully that'll fall our way a little bit better next year. But we'll have the opportunity to spend this off season, and certainly we'll be doing so with the idea to be more competitive and continue to put ourselves in positions for playoff baseball here.
Yeah, you look to build that competitive edge last season by spending Marcus Stroman and Seiya Suzuki, clear-cut, big-time additions. But when it comes to adding more players and winning pieces of the puzzle, does this team have to be at contender status to add, or are you always looking to build and get better? Because there's at least 2 players out there right now who, well, they change the tides of a team, Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. How in will the Cubs be on that sweepstakes?
I think anybody could look at those 2 guys and say, hey, I would love to have them in our uniform. And that's just, I think, a general baseball statement. I mean, there's some, generational type talents. As we're making these decisions about how to make our current team better, we always are going to want to think about how that's going to affect our future teams. And, it's a sliding scale there. And it's something that we'll have to think through on all those players. But I can safely say there's no player that we're not going to at least look into and make sure that we understand what the price is, understand what that cost is on future teams, or additions to future teams. And so we're excited to go through that process. There'll be a lot of different players that we'll be looking into this offseason because we owe it to Chicago to continue to put competitive teams out there, and that's something that we're going to want to do and something that we take really seriously.
Carter, when it comes to that window of opportunity and the Cubs hoisting another Commissioner's Trophy, where is the perfect sweet spot? Is it next season, 2023? Is it 2025, or is it beyond?
In terms of knowing when that's going to happen, who knows? You pull up Fangraphs and say, all right, like what are the World Series odds for any of these teams, right? And the very best teams in the league, it's 10%, 15%. So it's hard. It's really hard to do what the Cubs did in 2016. I know. I finished second.
Yeah.
Right? So, it's certainly hard to predict. What we can predict, though, in terms of more certainty is that we have a really good young crop of players that are starting to come up through our system. They're going to start impacting our major league team. We have a great ownership group that's going to help us build around that as those guys come up. We can't dictate their timelines, but we're going to push to make that as quick as possible without taken away from their ability to develop and really reach their potentials. So we know that when those things start to come together, we're going to have the resources to put together to give us that chance to be one of those top teams, to have the best odds in winning a World Series, and having another one of those parades I keep on seeing pictures of when I walk through the office.
Absolutely. Now, some of those resources towards the future, clearly down on the farm as it currently stands, Pete Crow-Armstrong, Caleb Killian, Alexander Canario, a lot of guys with a lot of upside. You have to feel a whole lot of promise when you look and see some of those minor league numbers.
No doubt. I mean, you look at a Pete Crow-Armstrong, you see him in the futures game. You see him adding a little bit of power to his game. You see him ranging 100 yards across the outfield and center field. I'm sure you've seen some of those plays that he's been making. So, that was a guy that because we made the difficult decision at the deadline last year, we were able to acquire him. And we have, at a minimum, 6 years of control over that player if he comes up and makes it to the major leagues. Now, he still has work to do. He still has things he has to do to get better. But those are the type of difficult decisions that we hope set us up to be that playoff contender, that World Series contender for a long time moving forward. So we're excited about guys like that. You mentioned a Canario, just unbelievable raw power.
Sure.
Kind of like a Nelson Velasquez last night.
Absolutely.
Both of those guys are able to hit the ball really, really hard and really, really far. And we'll just keep adding those types of guys to our system, keep putting the resources in place, having deliberate plans for those guys to grow and work on the goals that are going to help them bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to be. And when you do that over and over and over again, you build up this core of players that we can then supplement outside of the organization and win a bunch of baseball games. That's the idea. That's what we're working on every single day.
And what about the young arms like a DJ Hers, a Jordan Wicks, to go along with the 16 of 20 arms that were selected in the most recent MLB amateur draft? I mean, when it comes to prospects who could sling it, the Cubs, well, they're knocking them off a tree right now.
Yeah, it's fun to think about Hers and Wicks specifically, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Outside of being left-handed in pitchers, not much in common. Hers is a high strikeout. Command is something that he's working on right now, but that probably plays into some of his success. Wicks came from college a little bit more detailed, a little bit more able to control the ball over the plate, but also able to miss bats as well. Those are two guys that have kind of moved in lockstep up the system more recently, moving up from high A to double A, that we feel like both have chances of being long-term starting pitchers for us. Obviously, as we already talked about, there's 16 guys coming into the system right now that are arms that are going to be able to work up through that. Then there's guys that are in Double A and Triple A that are starting to matriculate up to the major leagues, like your Ullmans and your Hugheses, that we're excited about. So, yeah, I mean the process is in place, the machine is working. It's just takes some patience, and then that's something that is hard for all of us. It's certainly hard for us in the office, I can guarantee you that.
Okay, we talked about Pete Crow-Armstrong, the number 2 prospect in the Cubs minor league system, but how about the number 1 prospect in Brendan Davis? We know he went under the knife, had some back surgery, but he says he does want to return this season. Is that where you want him to be, returning from a back surgery? Because a guy with pop like that, sometimes those hinge points, they can be tricky down the line.
Yeah, I mean, obviously less than ideal than any time our guys have a surgery, and a back surgery, obviously less than ideal as well. The good part about Brendan's surgery is it wasn't a structural issue. We were afraid of that early on, and then we actually got in there and had the surgery, figured out that it wasn't, and it was something that was a little bit easier to recover from. We're hopeful that he gets in games in mid-August. Yeah. We would love to get him back on the field just for that mental kind of breather of like, hey, yeah, I'm back and I can have a normal off season. We'll think about ways to get as many at-bats as we possibly can. It's funny, as we're going through the draft, looking at Brendan's age and then comparing that to a lot of the guys in the draft age, Brendan's younger, right? So we're talking about these. Yeah, so we're talking about these guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that are bats, and we're saying, well, this guy's a year older than Brennan or 2 years older than Brennan. So it just reminds you that, hey, like he's got a long path here to both get to the major leagues and then a long time here with us once he's in the major leagues. So still really encouraged by him. Just want to get him back on the field and get him playing again. And hopefully that'll happen here soon in the next month.
Yeah, all in due time when it comes to Brendan Davis, Pete Crow Armstrong, and the list goes on when it comes to all these prospects. Now, Carter, you being in your first year as general manager of the Chicago Cubs, there have to be some growing pains, some lessons learned. Is there anything that comes to mind in particular when you have to navigate some of these waters of being a general manager of one of the most popular sporting franchises in all the world?
I mean, I think the fun part is the guy that had my job before, is 30 feet to the left of me.
Okay. Yeah.
So anytime that there's, struggles or things that we're working through, I have a great ear right there. And then, my other contacts in the game, and then having a wife back home that's so supportive is really helpful. But, it's hard. It's the most fun job in the world, but it's hard as well. I mean, we understand how much the Chicago fans around the world care about the Cubs. I talked about it in my press conference back in October. It feels like a couple days ago, but I guess it was about 8 months now. Just seeing the reaction of the Cubs fans when they won a World Series game, not the World Series, just a World Series game. And so knowing how hard it is, when we're not winning, when we're not in the position that we want to be in. Now, the hardest place for that is on the bench. That's Rossi and those guys. It's the hardest for them in the world. It's almost as hard for us. And so I think that aspect of things is not a surprise necessarily, but it's one that's really hit home of just, hey, like people care about this, and we have a responsibility to work every second of every day to try to put the best winning club on the field that we can. And so that's what I would say is just realizing how much of a responsibility that is and doing everything we can to make that happen for the people of Chicago and the guys on the field. And that's what we'll do.
David Rossi's a winner, signed a contract extension right before the season got underway. There's been ups and downs so far in his tenure as a Cubs skipper, but when you look at 2022 as a whole, how good of a job has David Ross done?
Really good. I mean, you give Casey Stengel a roster that, has a bunch of guys get hurt. It's going to be really difficult for him. So I think same for Rossi, right? Like he's had a odd entry into professional baseball. His first year was 2020, which was the most insane year of anyone's life. And I can tell you on the baseball side, there was nothing normal about that. And then 2021, there's an odd spring training and odd entry onto that. And then 2022, there's this whole lockout situation that threw a wrench in everything. So there really hasn't been anything normal to Rossi's entrance so far. The best part about Rossi, amongst a lot of things, is just his desire to learn and to grow. I think we all make mistakes every single day. Me and Jed probably more than anyone, I'm sure. But Rossi, after every game, we go over the things that he's learning and the things that he's growing from. And it's unbelievable just to see that mindset of like, hey, how can I get better every single day, no matter if it's a 10-run win or a 10-run loss. And so I think you put that together along with just his ability to connect with people, and there's a lot of encouraging things there.
Yeah, and you touched on the fact that if you give Casey Stengel a roster that has been decimated by injury, he'd have a tough time going out there and winning ball games too when you see all the injuries that have stacked up over the season. Nico runs into an umpire. Seiya Suzuki, he hurts his ring finger. Cody Hoyer goes down with Tommy John surgery. How frustrating have all those injuries been every turn of the corner?
They're frustrating, but I think it's you get 10 seconds of, all right, that's frustrating, then you get
let's move on.
Let's move on, and hey, how can we prevent these things from happening? Some of them, how can we prevent Nico from running into an umpire? Probably not going to figure that one out, right? But thinking about, okay, what can we do with our arm care programs? What can we do with our throwing programs? How can we think about acquiring players that have better health histories? How can we tweak anything that we can within our systems to try to keep guys as healthy as possible? Now, I don't think that we're actually looking to never have guys get hurt. I think that would mean that we weren't actually pushing guys, to their limits, but figuring out what's the optimal way to move forward so that we don't have these situations going forward is something that we're working on constantly, and really the only thing that you can do when those things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that we've seen happen a lot this season, the Cubs getting off, scoring first, but holding leads, that's been the biggest problem. And the Cubs, they've been in a lot of close ball games, 1-run games, 2-run games. And Rossi, just a few days ago, he said that this Cubs team right now, they need to learn how to win ball games. How does this young squad, a squad that has been decimated by injury, as we just touched on, how do they learn to win ball games, Carter?
Yeah, I think, you're kind of hitting on some of our situational struggles.
Sure.
Our runners in scoring position hitting, our runners in scoring position pitching, just in terms of shutdown innings in those situations. And that's something that has to be learned. I think, the sabermetricians of the world might say, hey, all of that's luck and it's just sample size and teams will regress to the mean. And certainly there's luck involved. But there's also an approach just to understand, okay, what am I trying to do? What is the pitcher trying to do to me? If I have a runner on second and nobody out, is he going to put a ball over the outside part of the plate so I can go the other way? It's like, no, he's going to go in on me. And so thinking about adjusting your approach that way and having those types of thoughts as a hitter, having those types of thoughts as a pitcher, and then just getting used to having those situations to allow our players to play up to their potential, whether it's a high leverage situation or a low leverage situation. That's something that Rossi and his experiences and our coaching staff are really good at and understand, but it's a process in teaching our guys, and it's things that, we're going over every single day with them.
Yeah, not to harp on the injury bug, but having a guy like Nick Madrigal healthy in situations when you go to extras with that ghost runner on second, he would certainly be a feather in the cap, as well as a player like Jason Hayward. We know those guys currently banged up. So what does the future hold for that pair right now?
Yeah, so Nick just had just started his rehab assignment once again last night in Iowa. Had a couple of knocks, so that was great to see. Yeah, so we'll make sure that he's healthy before we have any other decisions off of that. But just getting him healthy, we're excited. You talk about just his ability to make great contact. He showed that in 2020 with the White Sox. Obviously missed most of the year in 2021 with the hamstring injury. Haven't really gotten full Nick Madrigal up to this point in 2022, but know that he's itching to have that happen and is working really hard to get his body back in a place where he's able to play every day, and also get his swing in a place where he's able to be the player that he knows he can be. Jason obviously dealing with some knee injuries. Don't have a timeline at the moment for him, but somebody that obviously is such a huge part of this franchise. Has had so many major moments, such a leader in our clubhouse, and just so thankful that he's around and part of this team, regardless of the role. Yeah,
Dyersville, Iowa, Field of Dreams game right around the corner. Do you have your hotel reservations booked?
Luckily, we'll be on the plane in and out. I'm not sure that the Super 8 in Dyersville can hold all of us, right? But I'm really excited about that. I'm going to bring my dad out there.
Nice.
My mom and my wife are going to come as well. But just be able to share that type of moment is really cool. And watching that game on TV last year, I was thinking, man, that would be so awesome to be able to experience that. And for that to happen, a year later, I'm pretty pumped.
Carter, the day that you were named general manager of the Chicago Cubs, I'm sure you envision yourself hoisting one of those commissioner's trophies. Is that the end goal? Is that the end game right now for the Chicago Cubs franchise and you, Carter Hawkins?
It absolutely is for the franchise. And I'll say something that probably is a little bit corny here, but when you think about what is that vision, right? It's not that one person holding the trophy. I experienced the American League Championship, but it was being with the 20 guys in the clubhouse that you worked so hard over such a long period of time, having a beer and talking about all the moments that led to that moment. That was the moment that really encapsulated just the things that get us really excited in what we do. And that's absolutely something that we want to do here with the Cubs, and we want to do it a lot. We want to do it over and over again, which means being disciplined, having a great process, doing things that sound boring on the surface, but put you in a place to have long-term success in the future. And that's what we're really excited about doing.
Yeah, for the Chicagoans and Cubs fans who know what winning looks like in 2016, we saw a slight glimpse of that the weekend that the Cubs hosted the Boston Red Sox. And to see the Cubs in this situation record-wise, but to see the stands full, fans cheering from top to bottom, that has to be an encouraging sight.
Oh, yeah, it's super fun. But just walking in here and just understanding how supportive the Cubs fans are of the club, regardless of the situation. The energy in the ballpark, it's pretty special. My friends coming in, from Cleveland or from Atlanta where I grew up, and seeing just how the experience of going to a Cubs game, it's pretty special, and it's something that we certainly don't take for granted.
Yeah, 15 runs in game one of the second half of the season. Record aside, what are you looking to see out of this Cubs ball club in the second half, Carter?
Yeah, I think continuing to improve our approach offensively and from the pitching side. The continued development of some of our young players, getting them those reps at the major league level. A guy like Nelson Velasquez, seeing him get those opportunities at the major league side, it's worth its weight in gold. So that's something that I'm really, really excited about. And just continuing to refine our process at the major league level. I think, just thinking about how are we game planning? How are we distributing our lineups? How are we helping guys get better every single day? We got a whole half of a season to make sure that we're getting those better every single day. So we put ourselves in a really, really good position for 2023.
And when it comes to looking towards 2023, getting guys like Christopher Morel, Nelson Velasquez in there on an everyday basis, is that a point of emphasis right now?
I think certainly it's easy just to put Morel in the lineup because he's the best option,
anywhere,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, getting him those opportunities, getting the opportunities in the infield has been great. Getting the opportunities in center field has been great. You think about a lineup in 2023 and on, and you think about, okay, I want Christopher Morel in there,
Yeah.
but how nice is it to be able to say, hey, you can play all these different positions. I think about, not to compare players, but Jose Ramirez was a similar type player in Cleveland from a standpoint of he could play multiple positions. Now he's entrenched himself at third base, but he started in left field, played some short, played some second. That just gave him opportunities to get major league at bats. Same thing for Chris, and it'll also give us opportunities to put players in around him. So, what a great piece to have, and absolutely excited about having him in the organization.
Absolutely. Like Christopher Morel, flexibility is key, and that's exactly what Carter Hawkins has been able to do in his first season as the general manager of the Chicago Cubs. Carter, thanks so much for taking time out. We really appreciate it. We know your schedule, it's a tight one, so thanks to you and all the fans out there. I'm sure they thank you as well. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Cole. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
As always, now we are wrapping up with our story of the week on the pod. And so, Tony, I will start with you. This can be something that happened this past week leading up, still could happen this week. What do you got for me?
Well, I mean, honestly, it is all trade deadline stuff. I think that's the story of the week, really, even for the last couple of weeks. But for me, specifically, it's Ian Happ. The Cubs have another year of team control on him. They don't have to trade him, not have to, but they don't necessarily need to go that route. They can pick several different avenues with it. So I'm really curious to see what happens there. If they do trade him, if, the Juan Soto market doesn't develop the way teams like, and Ian Happ is this controllable piece for, 1.5 pennant races that teams can go out and get. And like Andy said, Andrew Benintendi's already gone. So if teams are needing an outfielder or a left fielder, Happ is an option. So I think that's really what I'm going to be looking at to see if Happ is part of the team in August and September, or, even next season, or if he is dealt away for what I assume would be a pretty hefty haul of prospects.
And for me, I'm kind of looking ahead to after the trade deadline. I thought one of the coolest moments last season was, the last game of the Washington National Series. The trade deadline is still pretty raw in everyone's, heads and everything. And Rafael Ortega goes out and hits 3 homers in a game. There's still really cool moments that can happen. And, I'm not saying there's going to be a 3-homer game, a couple of days after the trade deadline, but, there's a possibility that anything could happen, right? A guy that, maybe hasn't seen a ton of playing time can do something special. There's just possibilities of that. There's still plenty of storylines, Nelson Velasquez, Christopher Morel's development, things like that are going to be really, really exciting to see because, as you mentioned, if Ian Happ doesn't get moved, or if Ian Happ does get moved, that opens up some playing time for Nelson Velasquez. We see him a little bit more. He gets a little bit more runway in the major leagues, things like that. There's just going to be a lot of interesting storylines to follow in the immediate aftermath after the trade deadline.
Yeah, the theme of this season, guys, taking advantage of opportunities. And I think for me, it's just kind of what the team will look like. As simple as that. I think there's been a lot of anticipation of changes coming. And so now finally feeling like we'll have those answers soon and just kind of what a better sense of not just what this team could look like right now, but even as we head into the future. So we'll have those answers and then we're going to talk about it next week on the Cubs Weekly Podcast. Woo, I can already feel it's going to be a packed pod. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Cubs Weekly Podcast presented by Wintrust. Don't forget to download and subscribe to the pod on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and check us out in video form on the Marquee Sports Network app and YouTube. For Andy Martinez and Tony Andracki, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Cubs Weekly Podcast. Thanks for watching.